Hello, thank you for joining us here today. My name is Adam Dayan. I am a special education attorney. The name of my firm is the Law Offices of Adam Dayan. We help children with special needs receive a quality education and long term financial security. If you're not already familiar with our firm's podcast, I encourage you to check it out. It's called The Curious Incident, a podcast for special needs families, and you can find it wherever you get your podcasts. Today, I am joined by Dr. Yoni Schwab, who I'm going to introduce in a moment. Yoni, it's great to have you here.
Great to be here.
Excellent. Dr. Yoni Schwab is the assistant head of school at the Shefa School, a pluralistic Jewish day school for children with language based learning disabilities in Manhattan. He was a member of Shefa's 3-person founding team and has been involved in every aspect of the school since its launch in 2014. Yoni previously served as the psychologist at the Windward School and on the faculty of the Windward Teacher Training Institute, and he maintains a private clinical practice. Ready to get started, Yoni?
Let's do it.
All right. And just to remind everyone, this is a short talk. You can tune into a fuller conversation with Yoni on the subject of smartphones and social media, the emotional crisis affecting young people today. That's episode 31 on the Curious Incident podcast. So, Yoni, let's talk about the crisis. This is a huge crisis of our times, smartphones and social media and what it's doing to our youth. Can you provide an overview of how smartphones and social media are currently impacting young people?
Sure. And so, Adam, thank you so much for having me here today and giving space for this very important topic that impacts all children, all families, really all humans living in 2024, but in particular impacts kids who have all kinds of special needs and special challenges, we think more acutely in a lot of ways. So I want to give, first of all, credit to Jonathan Haidt and his research team. He's the recent author. He's a psychology professor at NYU, very prominent already, and came out with a book a few months ago called The Anxious Generation, where he really compiled a lot of the research that points in a pretty clear direction, and so is his argument, that the advent of smartphones and the way that social media has changed and the fact that we have social media in our pockets has really had tremendous negative impacts on kids and teenagers over the last 10 to 14 years. And it's really in that time period that we see this tremendous spike in all kinds of mental health challenges, whether it's anxiety and depression having gone up on roughly 130 to 160%, depending on the study. So that's more than double the incidence of depression and anxiety among young people, high school age through college. We've seen ADHD go up about 70%. We've seen eating disorders double. And it's not just a better rate of, maybe we're catching more and we're doing better diagnostically. It's not just that. It really does seem to be greater pathology because we're also seeing suicide rates go up very dramatically, which is really, really, really scary. And what Professor Haidt has done, I think, pretty effectively is he said, well, this is all correlational research, right? We see that it's happening around this time, but what about all these other factors that could be causing it? And surely some of them are, but he does a pretty good job in saying the only real factor that seems to be able to predict these things is the use of more and more smartphones and social media. So because of that, there's a real concern that the kids today who seem to have plummeting rates of spending time with friends, of social connections, of feeling confident in themselves, and a lot of these things even predate the pandemic, can really be pinned on the fact that so many of them have access to so much technology all the time and really takes them away from these more positive social environments.
So definitely a reminder to have more in real life experiences, which I know we're going to talk more about in a moment. Let me ask you, what are the unique challenges faced by young people with special needs when it comes to social media and smartphone use? And I mean, as opposed to typically developing children.
Sure. So first of all, I want to acknowledge that for all of us, smartphones are just a reality of life. And these are incredibly powerful technologies and things we are not going to give up. Like, I love being able to just quickly get on my phone and have GPS, be able to text my wife, I'm coming home from work, be able to look things up that I need to get access to. And there's something that we're going to have to live with the rest of our lives. So this is not about, let's throw them all in the garbage and go back to, living in caves. That's not possible, not even desirable. And so the question is not, what do we do about this horrible thing called a phone? It's how do we live with phones for the rest of our lives, and how do we raise kids in this age when screens are really proliferating? How do we do that healthfully? I think that is most acute for kids with all kinds of special needs and challenges. I think that the impacts that we see, I think of in kind of around four categories. I think about attention. I think about emotions, particularly what could lead to anxiety and depression, but that doesn't have to lead even to that pathology, but it can really impact kids emotionally, can impact their language, and impact them socially. I think just to give one example of those four, let's focus on attention. So this is something that is so easy for us to see. 150 years ago, if we were in class and we were really wanted to be distracted, what would we do? We'd have that boring Latin grammar book. And what would we want to put inside? We would put inside a comic book. And that would be really exciting and really distracting. And that was how we misbehaved 150 years ago. And then over time, we've gotten more and more distractions that have made it harder and harder to pay attention to things. So we had radio, TV, internet, then we had, broadband. And now all of a sudden we're in this smartphone / social media era where you can watch YouTube videos that are 3 minutes long, and even that feels long. And TikTok, they're literally seconds. And so think about your own attention span. How many people who used to read books have trouble paying attention to books nowadays? I hear from my kids who are older teens and young adults that they don't always like to watch movies because movies are boring. They're too long. And I'm thinking, when I was a kid, a movie was like one of the most exciting things that I could do. And so we've just socialized our entire culture to have shorter and shorter attention spans, worse and worse self-regulation, and more difficulty with delay of gratification and kind of planning ahead. So if you think of a kid who starts off with ADHD or difficulty with executive functioning, which many, many do, and we're creating an entire society where everyone's getting worse at that, it makes it even worse for them. And so as much as the phone can be a very powerful tool to help them with, for example, reading, or it can be a powerful tool to even connect socially with people that, if they feel unique where they are and they can connect to other people in their tribe in different locations, those are really powerful, positive uses of technology. At the same time, it's in many cases fragmenting their attention and making it much harder for them to focus on the skill building or even the socialization that they need.
And the impact on their attention span, do you want to give an example, tie it to the classroom, and demonstrate how it's affecting students' growth and development?
Sure. I want you to just picture a typical classroom. And here at the Sheffield School, we're a school for kids with language-based learning disabilities. So we have 225 kids here who have language challenges, and many of them also have attentional challenges. And so we're always thinking about how do we engage them? How do we keep them engaged in doing hands-on and paying attention? Because they have a lot of skill building to catch up to kids in the mainstream. And, I'm very pleased to say that the vast majority of our kids, well over 90%, return successfully to mainstream schools, which is really exciting. But that process can be a little bit painful at times when you see that a kid walks in, they have easy access to their phone outside of school. They're watching short videos. They're kind of getting delayed. There's no delay of gratification. Everything's instant. Then we come into school. What are we asking them to do? Listen to a teacher. Now, our teachers don't talk at you for 40 minutes. That's not how we work. But they talk for a few minutes to explain something and give you a new skill. And then they say, okay, sit with this pencil and write. Or they say, this is a long math problem. See if you can do long division. These are really important skills that kids need to learn how to do. And if you're used to instant gratification and not used to paying attention for a 40-minute period or even a 10-minute period, that can be extremely hard to then be available for that instruction and be able to stick with it. And we're seeing those attention spans shorten and shorten and shorten. And for us, we're always trying to practice lengthening them. When our kids walk in, when they're new here, they can't sit for 10 minutes of a reading class because it's so boring and so, frankly, hard. They really struggle with reading. By the end, we're doing 80 to 90 minutes of reading, maybe with a break in the middle, but they're really able to, we really work on lengthening their attention span. Unfortunately for us, that is really working. Not only do we have to deal with their biology, but kids have always been built that way. That's what we do. We're now also working against the kind of environment they have outside of here that really makes it much harder for them to learn those skills of resilience, sticking with it, and paying attention over the long term.
Yep. Thank you for that example. Let's talk about spectrum of harm. Are there specific types of social media platforms or smartphone apps that seem to have a more pronounced effect on young people?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And because we're not talking in black and white terms, like phones are terrible, throw them out, don't do any social media ever, right? That's just not realistic and probably not even desirable. We have to start thinking about things strategically. So if we're going to learn to live with these things, what's better and what's worse? And so it helps to really think about what's the function and how does this affect us? So for example, and this I'll give Jonathan Haidt also credit. He gives this example. He's like, what's one of the best uses of a phone for a child? What about calling grandma? Right? Grandparents live in a different city, far away. They visit a couple of times a year, and you want your 3-year-old to FaceTime with them, and they're looking basically face to face. It's almost, pretty similar to real life, not quite, but close. And they're having a whole conversation, interaction. Maybe grandpa reads a book. They interact. It can be very beautiful and very positive. Now, is that as good as being, flying in and giving them a hug and sitting on the couch together? No, that's not as good. Obviously, real life is better than FaceTime, but it's pretty good. And it's better than having to go 6 months without having that interaction with them. So there are really positive ways that we can use technology, and that any kind of technology. On the opposite side, if you picture kids who are getting on a FaceTime and they're bullying someone or making fun of someone, or they're posting negative things about it, that's in the opposite end, in terms of that spectrum of harm. That's very harmful, not only for the victim, but frankly also for the bullies, and not something that we want to encourage. So we really have to be thoughtful about, for all screens, essentially, okay, you have FaceTime on one end, you're interacting socially, maybe you're listening to music, but not looking at a screen. That's really not so bad, especially if you're not in a social environment, you're kind of on your own, you're going for a run, something like that. Great, that's not so bad. And then you're thinking about in the middle, maybe watching TV with your family or watching Netflix with your family. Now you're socially interacting or watching live sports. All right, that's medium. You're moving over towards gaming. All right, a little bit of gaming every day for, I have teenagers, and they like gaming, and that's really fun for them. Sorry about that. But they do that with friends for an hour. Okay, that's medium. Would I rather be reading a book or outside playing basketball? Sure, but it's late at night. That's not so bad. Now we're going to social media where they're really scrolling. They're comparing, the body image stuff with girls gets really intense, and the comparisons. That's not so great. And now we're moving all the way to, kind of extremism, being sucked into YouTube for hours and hours and hours and not getting out of bed. And now you're really at another spectrum of harm. And if we really think strategically about all those different pieces and think about how do we create environments where it's okay to use, this is how we use technology. This is when it's okay to use technology, with whom we can create spaces where technology are either, positive to neutral in reasonable amounts. But when it takes over our lives and it's available every minute and it's distracting us and we're sitting at the dinner table and we can't have a conversation because, someone's picking up a phone in the middle and getting distracted, that's that's where you really see the really negative interference. And so it does take a lot of gray, right? And it'd be easier to say black and white, but we're not in a position to do that.
Right. So definitely important to keep that spectrum in mind. Let's focus on the part of the spectrum that has more harmful apps. What is it about these platforms that are causing such a sharp rise in anxiety and depression in young people?
Yeah, and so I think there's so much out there about the kind of potential harms of social media. So first, I do want to call out that social media has positive pieces, right? It is a way to connect people. It's not a very satisfying way to connect if it's just on social media, right? In a way, we think it's social media, but the reality is that real social connections, satisfying social connections, are face to face. And even what you and I are doing now, Adam, where we're kind of looking each other in the eye and having a back and forth conversation, is much more how human beings were developed than texting back and forth, posting online to kind of a large group of people. That doesn't really give us that positive social feedback. So just the ability to say my social life is going to be much more online and much more through social media rather than IRL and going out with friends or having friends over to my bedroom and hanging out, or walking through the woods together and kind of doing and going to the playground. That is going to really mitigate it. And we know, if we were to look at anxiety and depression research, and we know how to treat those things, and we were to design a technology that really made us more anxious and more depressed, we'd basically design a phone. Because not only does it do all that comparison stuff and make us feel badly about ourselves, we know that there's a real crisis of loneliness in our country. The Surgeon General's come out about that. And there's actually a real crisis in the data about self-esteem, where people are feeling worse and worse and worse about themselves, particularly teens are feeling worse and worse and worse about themselves as they compare themselves online. But we're also saying, oh, we'll give you this phone and you can, rather than feeling the need to go out and hang out with your friends outside, you could just lie in bed and barely move, one finger. And we know that, the best way to combat depression is to be active. It's called behavioral activation. Well, the phone is essentially the opposite of that. The best way to get over your anxiety when you're interacting with people, let's say your social anxiety or whatever anxiety is, to expose yourself to it. So when you go to a party and you are standing in the corner with your phone, and allows you to avoid kind of interacting with all those scary kids over there, those middle school kids that you're a little intimidated by, you're never going to get over your social anxiety. But if you don't have a phone, there's nothing in between. Hopefully you get pulled into those conversations. Hopefully you practice a little bravery in terms of interacting. So to the extent that phones and social media are escapes, comparisons, they're addictive, they bring us in, we don't move our bodies. Those are all the ways that we know that are going to make us more anxious and depressed and really make things much worse.
Right. So what you said about in real life experiences, which you called IRL, and having human interactions, Jonathan Haidt talks about it in the sense of play-based interactions. As we're reducing phone-based interactions, we also need to be increasing play-based and human-based interactions. So definitely wanted to underscore that. Let's talk about some solutions. How can parents set limits so their children consume technology responsibly?
Great question. And I'll give you a few ideas, but there's so many more ideas out there, and a few principles to start with so you don't get overwhelmed. First of all, start small. Start with what's realistic. Start with the low-hanging fruit. If we say, you have to your family has unlimited screen time and now you're going to 10 minutes a night, that's probably too big a jump. Really think about something that you can do as a family, you can commit to, because what you actually do is better than that. The good that you do is much better than the perfect you intended to do. And so don't make perfect the enemy of the good. So be realistic. Start with the grownups. Adulting is hard. And we as grownups, when I have these conversations with grownups about their kids, the conversations inevitably end up with, oh, but I'm really addicted to my phone and I have trouble putting it away and I have trouble not looking at Instagram. And if we are the models for our kids and we're the ones with the self-regulation and we're the ones with the responsibility and we're expecting them to do better than us, no way. We need to start to address our own phone addiction and our own relationships and figure out when is an appropriate time to use my phone. I'm on a train, I'm getting my work done, I'm responding to email. Great, that's a great place to use your phone. When I'm at dinner with my family, no way. It's not even on the table. Because we know that even if your phone's on the table, it's more distracting than if your phone's in your pocket or far away. So no phones at dinner, for example. So think about your own phone use and how much you're using it around your kids in particular, because they're watching you. Kids learn more from what we do than from all of our words combined. So that's first of all, is be realistic, consider our own phone use first. And remember, there's positives to phones and negatives to phones. And so how do we balance those things? So a few ideas. One is if your child does not yet have a cell phone, delay when you give them their own device, whether it's a phone, which Jonathan Haidt suggested should be only in high school, not before. That would be ideal. You may have to work in community to do that because that's something that's very hard to be the only kid like that. So that's really where we come together and deal with the collective action problem. So delay giving phone, but even delay giving their own iPad or their own whatever, because when your child owns something, they think they have a right to it. As opposed to if your family has a couple of iPads and they can use it when you say, that's very different. Think about the amount of time in the day. That's one limit. Think about times of day. Think about not half an hour before bedtime. We know that interferes with sleep. Make sure that they're using it. Again, for younger kids, they're always using their phones or their devices in a public space where you can look over their shoulder anytime. Make sure you have an open line of communication. Make sure they know that they have to come to you if they see something that's uncomfortable. I mean, there's a lot of garbage, as we know, that we don't want our kids exposed to. One of the things that Jonathan Haidt says, I think very, very poignantly, is that we underprotect in the digital world, but overprotect in the real world. So one of the ways to do this is to really say, we really want to be involved when you're online and maybe do things together or make sure you come to us if there's a problem. And we also want to send you outside and go to the corner to pick up milk or run around the neighborhood without a lot of supervision, because that's actually incredibly safe. And so we want to really shift this from, it's not just we're taking away phones and giving you nothing. we're taking away phones and giving you more access to the world, more independence, more freedom, sometimes more activity that you're going to do with your child, which is great. And also a lot of time for them to be bored, because boredom is incredibly important and incredibly productive for creativity and growth and resilience. It's uncomfortable. Kids don't like to be bored. And if you let them go, they'll figure it out. So those are some of the basics. Work with your communities. Really think through your community. Like really talk to your friends and the teachers and the parents in your class at school. When do we want to give phones to our kids? Do we want to have, or if they already have phones, can we limit what time they stop their text chatting at night, right? Some of the group chats can go until 11 o'clock at night in 6th grade. That's totally inappropriate. Everyone should be off those group chats. Maybe group chats are not really appropriate for lower school, and even in middle school, they have trouble with them. There's a lot of bullying that goes on in those group chats. Think through kind of how, as a community, we can come together once they have their devices to really be thoughtful about using them. Have some play dates be phone free or low tech. Okay, you can play video games for half an hour, the rest of the time play outside, or not at all. And then, you don't want to be the only house that, doesn't allow phones. The kids will never come to your house. But if all the kids have low tech on their play dates, then all the houses are places that they'll want to go and play soccer and build Legos and play board games. So really, it's thinking through in all these different realms. What can you start to do? And again, start small and go slow.
Thank you, Yoni. Those were great tips. Any final thoughts or encouraging words that you'd like to share with people?
I think it's always helpful to think about this in the long term. There was a moral panic around writing. Socrates bemoaned the proliferation of writing because he thought that people would stop memorizing things. And he was right. People did not memorize as well after Socrates' time, but we wouldn't give up writing. And when Gutenberg invented the printing press, there was a moral panic around that books would transform the world. And guess what? They did. And there was a lot of disruption in the culture for a long period of time until we figured out how to live with books. Same with TV and same with the internet and all those things. And I know we'll look back here in 30 or 40, now the pace of change is so quick that it's very hard and very disruptive. But I know we're going to look back in 30 or 40 years and say, oh, I remember nostalgically that beautiful time in 2024 when all we had were smartphones and social media. And now we have this horrible, terrible other thing. So I have a lot of confidence that we as humanity, I have a lot of, I would say, hope that we as humans can figure out every new technology and hopefully learn to live with them. We just have to do it strategically and thoughtfully and not let them take it over. So I think we've also created spaces in our culture where we put away phones, and it's incredibly powerful, and we're able to balance that. I think of my kids who go to summer camp. My kids, they're now counselor age, but when they were campers, the last time I said, wow, you're not going to have your phone for 7 weeks. How do you feel about that? And they said, we feel great. I said, why do you feel great? They said, well, everyone we want to talk to is going to be right there. And so even our kids know that it's better when they have an environment when they can't be the only one without a phone, or they don't want to be, but they like being in an environment where a lot of kids don't, and they can really be in that space. So can we create bubbles and spaces where it's not appropriate to pull out your phone? Mm-hmm. I think about my own community. I'm from the Jewish community, and we have Shabbat. And Shabbat, doesn't matter how you keep Shabbat. A lot of people use phones. Some people don't use phones. Doesn't matter. When you go to a Shabbat meal in my community, no one has a phone. They don't pull it out. It's not a thing. And you can sit and have a 3-hour conversation. And it's just a beautiful, luxurious thing. And so can we create spaces where we can really also live our lives? And then right now we're on this, podcast, we're on this live event, and we're using our phones, we're using our computers, and that's a beautiful thing too. So really finding that balance and really finding ways to live with it strategically in ways that really benefit our lives, and kind of mitigating those costs, and really making space for all the other things that are important to us.
That's wonderful, Yoni. We're going to end on that note. I really appreciate your joining us as we continue to confront the challenges of a phone-based lifestyle. Again, you can catch episode 31 on the Curious Incident podcast for a fuller conversation with Yoni. Thanks so much and have a great day.
Thank you. And if anyone has any questions about Shefa School for their child who has a learning disability and would love to go to a Jewish day school, we're open for that too. I know we didn't talk about that today, but that's what I do with most of my time, and always there to help out more kids. Thanks, Adam.
Perfect, Yoni. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.